Dear viewers, this is the story of a young Texas female police officer who lived by the rules until she met a prisoner whose last wish would change both of their lives forever. She thought it was just another ordinary day at work. But what started inside the walls of a prison slowly turned into something deeper, a bond, a connection, and a love she never saw coming and couldn't walk away from. Stay with me right to the end, because this story will touch your heart in ways you don't expect. And if you love stories filled with real emotions and unforgettable moments, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's begin. Sandra wasn't just another officer in uniform. She was young, beautiful, and smart. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Her smooth brown hair was always tied neatly. Her uniform was spotless, and her calm way of speaking made people pay attention without her even trying to. It wasn't only her looks that made her stand out. Sandra was disciplined, hardworking, and respectful to everyone. She followed the rules, never cut corners, and never mixed personal life with work. But that didn't stop the attention. Almost every week, someone tried their luck. Officer Dan from traffic brought her coffee every morning. Officer Raymond just happened to park next to her car almost every evening, hoping she'd need a ride. There was even an older detective who once left a rose on her desk with a note that read, "Dinner." Sandra smiled politely, thanked them, and said no every time. Her quiet refusals made her even more mysterious. But for Sandra, her personal rule was simple. Work is work. Some men laughed it off. Others grew frustrated. But no one took rejection harder than her boss, Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas was a man who didn't like hearing no. In his late 50s, he had silver hair, an expensive watch, and the kind of power that made people afraid to cross him. From the moment Sandra joined the station, Lucas kept his eye on her more than any other officer. She noticed. Everyone noticed, but she ignored it and kept her head down. That worked until the day he called her into his office. Sandra walked in, and Lucas shut the door behind her. "Sandra," he began, leaning back in his leather chair. "You've been doing very well here. You're smart, disciplined. You have a real future in this department." Sandra kept her hands folded in front of her. "Thank you, sir." He smiled, tapping his pen on the desk. "You know, I could help you move up faster. There are openings coming soon. Promotions, better pay, better hours. You deserve it." Sandra stayed quiet. She had a feeling where this was going. Then his smile changed. "Sandra, I like you more than just as an officer. I want us to be close. You and I could make things better for each other." Sandra's stomach tightened. "Sir," she said carefully, "with all due respect, I'm here to do my job, nothing more." Lucas's expression hardened. "You're saying no to me?" "Yes, sir," she replied steadily. "You're my superior, and you're old enough to be my father." The air shifted. Lucas leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You do understand there are consequences for the choices we make, right?" Sandra's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong." "Wrong? No, but you're making things complicated for yourself. I could make life harder for you here. Much harder. In fact, I could send you somewhere you'd wish you'd thought twice. Somewhere more toxic." Sandra felt a wave of unease. "Sir, please. I've worked hard here. I've respected everyone. There's no need for this." Lucas sat back, tapping the desk with his finger. "Then maybe you should think about respecting me." Sandra stayed silent, her heartbeat steady, even though her mind was racing. Lucas finally waved his hand toward the door. "You can go now." Sandra took a slow breath, nodded, and left. She didn't need to be told what was coming next. The following week, she got the call from HR. No meeting, no discussion, just a statement. She was being transferred to a penitentiary facility far from Dallas, far from her home. The official reason was staff adjustments. But Sandra knew exactly why. She didn't complain. She wouldn't give Lucas that satisfaction. She packed her things and left. The penitentiary was a different world. The first thing Sandra noticed was the air. It felt heavier, colder, as though the walls themselves carried the weight of the lives. Inside, the gates shut behind her with a metallic clang she felt in her chest. The facility was bigger, louder, and far more tense than her station in Dallas. The inmates were different, too. Every day she saw men who wore anger in their eyes. Others looked broken, as if the years had drained the life from them. A few kept their heads down, saying little. Sandra adjusted quickly. She followed her training, kept her distance, and avoided unnecessary conversations. And that's when she first noticed him. Michael. Michael wasn't like the others. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with calm eyes that didn't match the rough place he was in. His hair was kept neat. His uniform was clean. Most prisoners had a certain hardness in their faces, years of regret or anger. But Michael's expression was different. Sandra told herself not to notice, but she couldn't help seeing the way his gaze followed her. From the first week, Michael's eyes found her whenever she passed. Not in the crude way some prisoners looked at female officers, but in a way she couldn't quite explain. She brushed it off. She was there to work. Days turned into weeks. Sandra's routine became familiar. Check shifts, monitor movements, escort inmates to and from the yard. Sometimes she caught sight of Michael across the cafeteria or in the exercise yard. He never spoke to her, but the look in his eyes, it was almost like he was waiting for something. One afternoon, she was assigned to escort a group of prisoners to the yard. It was a simple routine. Line them up, check the cuffs, and lead them outside. She was halfway through the group when she passed Michael. As she stepped by, she felt something slip into her palm. Quick, smooth, and invisible to anyone else. A folded piece of paper. Her eyes flicked toward him. Michael didn't look at her directly, but his voice was low enough for only her to hear. Read it when you're alone. Her heart skipped. Her face remained calm, but her mind was already turning. When the prisoners were secured in the yard, she slipped the note into her pocket. Later, in the quiet of the break room, she opened it. A single line written in small, neat handwriting. Clinic midnight. She stared at the words. Michael was in the prison clinic that day, claiming he was sick. She knew inmates sometimes faked illness for attention. She told herself she wouldn't go. It wasn't professional. It wasn't smart. But as the clock inched toward midnight, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The prison was silent at midnight, but Sandra's heart wasn't. She told herself she wouldn't go to the clinic. She told herself she'd ignore the note. But as the hour approached, her feet seemed to have a mind of their own. The corridor was dim, only a few lights buzzing faintly above her. Her steps echoed against the floor, sounding louder than she wanted. When she reached the clinic door, she paused. This was wrong. She knew it, but her hand still found the handle. The door opened with a soft creak. Michael was sitting on the edge of the bed, leaning forward as if he'd been waiting for hours. His eyes lit up the moment she saw him. "You came," he said quietly. Sandra closed the door behind her, arms crossed to remind herself she was still in uniform. "This isn't professional. You shouldn't have called me here." Michael stood slowly, taking a step closer, but keeping a respectful distance. "I know, but if I didn't, I might regret it for the rest of my life." Sandra's chest tightened, but she kept her tone steady. "Michael, whatever this is, it can't happen. You're a prisoner. I'm an officer." Michael's eyes held hers. "That's the problem. You see a prisoner. I see the only person in this place who treats people like they still matter." Sandra felt her breath catch for a second. "You shouldn't say things like that." He smiled faintly, a quiet sadness in his eyes. "I don't have much to lose by saying what I feel, but you still have your life outside. You don't take risks unless they're worth it." Sandra looked away, pretending to scan the room. "Why am I here, Michael?" Michael's voice softened. "Because I need you to know the truth. I don't belong here, and I have one last wish before I die in this place. I need you to hear my story." Sandra hesitated, then gave a small nod. Michael took a deep breath. "Before this, I worked as a production supervisor at Carlton Foods. I'd been there 8 years. I handled quality control. Every batch, every shipment, my signature had to be on it. I was proud of that job. We made clean, safe food for families across Texas." Sandra nodded slightly, listening. Michael's expression darkened. "Then one day, the upper management called me into a private meeting. They said costs were too high. Competition was getting stronger. They'd found a way to cut costs, new preservatives, cheaper ingredients. But those chemicals weren't approved for human consumption. Some of them were outright toxic if used in high amounts." Sandra frowned. "And they wanted you to approve it." I nodded. "Exactly. They said it wouldn't kill anyone, that it was just bending the rules a little. But I'd seen the reports. It wasn't bending the rules. It was breaking them completely. I refused to sign off." Sandra tilted her head slightly. "And they didn't like that. They offered me money to keep quiet, a promotion, even a share in the profits," Michael said bitterly. "When I refused, Things got tense. I told them I wanted to resign. I was planning to go to the media. I had proof, test results, emails, everything. Sandra leaned in slightly. What happened? Michael gave a humorless laugh. They got to me first. One morning, the police showed up at my house. They said I'd been stealing company funds and falsifying reports. They found evidence in my computer and even forged my signature on certain documents. Everything I'd gathered against them was gone. Sandra's stomach twisted. So they framed you. 15 years without parole. That was my reward for trying to do the right thing. Sandra was silent for a long moment. His story sounded too detailed, too specific to be just another inmate's lie. Michael looked at her, his voice steady but heavy. I'm not asking you to believe me instantly. I just have one last wish. Investigate. Look into them. If I'm lying, you'll see. But if I'm telling the truth, you'll know why I can't stop fighting, even from in here. Sandra hesitated. Michael, this could cost me everything, my career. He stepped closer, his voice softer now. I'm not asking you to risk your career for me. I'm asking you to follow the truth. You do that every day. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Sandra exhaled slowly. I'll see what I can do. Michael's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes softening. Thank you, Sandra. That's all I wanted. Sandra turned to leave, her heart heavier than when she walked in. She knew she had just crossed a line, and she also knew it wasn't the last time she'd see Michael. The next day, she began her quiet investigation. She started by looking into Michael's old company. Official reports showed nothing unusual. Everything looked clean on paper, but Sandra knew how to read between the lines. She reached out to an old contact from her time in Dallas, a journalist who'd covered corporate scandals. You didn't hear this from me, but there's been whispers about that company for years. Safety violations, health complaints, but nothing ever sticks. Someone's covering their tracks. Sandra dug deeper. She pulled old case files, employee testimonies, and environmental reports. Slowly, a pattern began to appear. Hidden payments, silenced employees, missing reports. 2 months later, everything changed. The investigation blew open when a former employee came forward with proof, emails, signed documents, and safety test results that had been buried. The truth was clear. Michael had been framed. The court moved quickly. His conviction was overturned. Michael was a free man. Sandra was there the day he walked out of the penitentiary. He stepped into the sunlight, the same calm look on his face, but his eyes softened when they met hers. Thank you, he said simply. Sandra nodded, keeping her expression professional. You deserve your life back. Michael smiled faintly. You gave it to me. For days, Sandra felt a quiet sense of relief. Everything had worked out. Michael was free. The company was under investigation. Justice had been served. Then the news came. Michael had been kidnapped. Sandra was at home when she saw the report. On TV, her stomach dropped. She turned up the volume, but the details were scarce, just that he'd been taken by unknown men. Her phone buzzed with messages from her colleagues. None of them had answers. Sandra paced her living room, her mind racing. That's when she saw it. A note sitting on her kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked it up. The handwriting was neat, but the message was cold. If you want to see Michael again, come to Houston alone. Call this number when you arrive. Sandra's pulse quickened. Houston alone. No backup. She sat down, the note still in her hand, her thoughts spinning. This wasn't over. Not even close. Dear viewers, Sandra thought freeing Michael would be the end of their story, but it was only the beginning. Part 2 will take their bond to a place neither of them expected. And trust me, you'll want to see what happens next between them. If you're ready for Part 2, type Part 2 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of their story.